in 0. So that shouldn't be any new idea at all, right? So if we plug in 0 for all of those x's, we're going to find our y-intercept. So I'll do kind of the first couple with you. So if I plug in 0, what will I get? 2 in the numerator and -9 in the denominator, right? So 0, comma, -2/9 is my y-intercept. Easy. Plug in 0 for all the x's and see what you get. The only thing that makes it challenging is when you have 4 different steps to remember, it makes that first step seem harder, I think. What happens when I plug in 0 in g of x? I get 0 in the numerator and I get -9 in the denominator. Am I allowed to do 0 divided by -9? Here's where you need your confidence, right? You can take 0 and divide by anything except 0. And if you want to check it on a calculator, you could do 0 divided by -9 and it'll tell you the answer is 0. So that's allowed. 0 divided by anything is 0. So my y-intercept is 0, 0. All right. I guess this is practicing y and then the back is practicing x. Okay, we probably can do all these. So in h, what happens? Plug in 0 for all those x's and you end up with 5. Plug in 0 in the denominator and you end up with -8. So 0, -5/8 is your y-intercept. What happens in j of x? If I try to plug in 0 in the numerator, I still get 1. If I plug in 0 in the denominator, oh, I get 0. So there's actually no y-intercept, right? Because the y-intercept would have been undefined. So it's okay for there to be no y-intercept because it's probably our asymptote line. So you're going to see that sometimes you can't get one. So that's it. That's step 1. That's 1/4 of graphing a rational function. It's finding the y-intercept. Oops. Step 2 is finding the x-intercepts. So this one gets a little bit harder because you need to be able to maybe factor. And basically, we're going to plug in 0 for y. So set the equation equal to 0. That's y, right? So if you're going to set the equation equal to 0, what would be your first step to solve for x? So when you have a fraction equal to 0, your first step is to multiply the denominator to the other side, right? What happens when I take the denominator and I multiply it to the other side? I still have 0. Would you agree? To get this out of the denominator, I multiply x minus 9 to the other side. Guess what? That gives me 0 equal to the numerator. So it says, in other words, in the case of a rational function, we can just set the numerator equal to 0. So in all of these functions, all you have to do is say what will make the numerator equal 0. What would make that true in this function? X would have to be what? -2 is your x-intercept. So all you have to do is find where the numerator will be 0. So take a look at g of x. What will make that numerator equal 0? What would x have to be? Can x be 9? X has to be 0, right? That will make the numerator 0. So 0, 0 is your x-intercept. If you look back on the previous page, this is the same function. What did we say our y-intercept was? Also 0, 0. If your x-intercept is 0, 0, then your y-intercept will also be 0, 0. All right, here's the first one that relies on factoring. I have to set this quadratic, x squared plus 6x plus 5, equal to 0. Here's where your knowledge of solving a quadratic is important. You cannot find the x-intercepts without factoring that quadratic. Right? So how does it factor? I use the diamond method. I'm looking for the factors of 5 that add up to 6. So what are my factors going to be? What times what will give me 5? Right, you want the factors of 5. You were thinking of the factors of 6. So 5 times 1 is 5. So this factors into x plus 5 in parentheses, x plus 1 in parentheses equals 0. What are my two solutions? So what are my two x-intercepts? -5 and -1. So I have two x-intercepts, -5 and -1. So there's where our factoring is going to come into play, finding x-intercepts of rational functions. So that's why that skill is going to be practiced throughout this whole unit as well. And what happens in j of x? Can I ever make a constant equal 0? So in this case, it's 1, right? It's always 1. There's nothing else it can be. So in this case, it will have no x-intercept, and that is okay. All right, I think it would be good practice for you to try the next page on just finding x and y intercepts before we move on to anything else. I like to compartmentalize things. So if it were me, I would practice finding all of the y-intercepts first to do that whole column. Then I would do all of the x-intercepts second. But if you want to do y-intercept and then x-intercept, that's okay. I just like to do like all the same kind of process. So see if you can answer those questions using the examples. Let me know if you need some help because I can walk over and try to help you. I'll go through, I like to do like all the y-intercepts first, just because that I'm thinking in one frame of mind. So if I do my y-intercept, I would get 0 divided by 8 is 0. Right, so my y-intercept would be at 0, 0 for that first one. And then if I plug in 0, I would have -4 over 8. So that would be at -1/2. If you wrote -4 over 8, that's fine. It means the same thing. Let's see, if I plug in 0, I would just get 5/4. So 0, 5/4. And if I plug in 0, it looks like I get 1 over 0, right? So in that case, you could not leave that as your answer. You need to write out there is no y-intercept. If you leave it like this, I'm going to think you are confused and are not sure of the final answer. So be bold and either write that the answer is 0 or the answer is no y-intercept. But cannot have something that is sitting on top of nothing. So it's 0 in the denominator, that's the problem. All right, so then for my x-intercepts, I'm tunnel vision. I'm only looking at the numerator this time. So what will make the numerator 0? 0 for the first one. What will make this numerator 0? If you can't do it in your head, you need to write out that equation that 2x minus 4 equals 0 and then solve for x. Add 4 to the other side, divide by 2, x would have to be 2, 2, 0. Don't be afraid to write out the algebra steps. That's fine. As long as you get to the right answer, I don't care how you do it. And honestly, if you're going to make a mistake in your head, at least if you had written out this equation, I know that you know the process. You just messed up with the algebra rather than you put the number 7, 0 and I have no idea what you were looking at to get 7. At least I know that you wrote out the right first step. There's none for this one, right? The answer is always 5, so there's no x-intercept on that one. And it looks like the answer would be 1, because 1 minus 1 would give me 0. So 1, 0. So that is half of graphing a rational function. You find the x and y intercepts and you plot them on the axis. So the other half is finding your two asymptotes. So the thing that makes it tricky is keeping all 4 things separate, and that's what the note card is going to help you with on Friday, because we're going to write on the note card, how do I find the y-intercept? Plug in 0 for x. How do I find the x-intercept? Set the numerator equal to 0. And we can put like an example of what that looks like on the note card. So then all you have to do is apply it when you get to the quiz.